had not forgotten them.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. You're listening to Sundays on the East End here with Bridget Leroy.
And Alex Sokolow.
And we're here welcoming our guest for the day, Duncan Darrow of Fighting Chance. How are you, Duncan?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Great. Well, we were talking about, the subject that, 20 years ago was never discussed, which is cancer and ways in which people can fight it. And Duncan started Fighting Chance. How long ago? 18 years?
18 years ago.
Yeah, perhaps tell us or share with us what motivated you starting Fighting Chance.
Yeah, I mean, and also you're in Sag Harbor, so it's a Sag Harbor-based business, yeah?
Yeah, we're in Sag Harbor, above Geek Hampton there on Bay Street. It started in 2001 when my mother, who lived out here, got lung cancer, and I was the caregiver, and she battled for a few months, not long, and we had 100 questions and no one to answer them.
Really?
Yeah, and they could be psychological, they could be practical, runs the gamut. And after she died, like a lot of people who survive, family members, you want to do something. So I became a hospice volunteer and got very involved with hospice for about a year, observed what they were doing. I always used to say to them, this is great, but we could use hospice at the beginning of the cancer journey, not just at the end.
And what did you mean by that? You mean the
meant
compassionate
the first
care?
Week. Yeah, hospice it's professional, it's free, it is empathic, it has a kind of sense of grassroots and community, driven.
Right.
And in those days it was terrific, and it still is. So they said, well, we don't do the beginning of the journey, we only do the end.
Well, and why do you think historically that was the case?
Just the roots of hospice, which was a vehicle to help people die. And in those days,
help people die gracefully,
yeah.
I guess, with dignity.
Yeah, I thought dying was easy and comedy was hard.
Well, that's because you're a comedy writer, but let me tell you something. Comedy's not so hard.
So about 90% of the patients in those days were late-stage cancer, and the woman who ran it was terrific. She's just retiring now. She said, well, if you wanted to start something at the beginning, you'll probably choke in red tape because there's a lot of paperwork because we worry about who's going to pay for what.
Uh-huh.
I said, well, what if it's free? She said, well, then you go bankrupt. So I said, okay, that's a great choice. So I guess I'll go with bankrupt. So we started Fighting Chance on the basis that everything we would do for patients would be free.
What was your history before that?
I was a Wall Street lawyer, and I worked mostly in Southeast Asia during the financial crisis.
And you're a lawyer named Darrow. Any relation to Clarence?
No relation. No.
Okay,
no
America's atheist.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's right, because Alec wrote a musical about Clarence Darrow.
That exists in my mind. It plays 8 performances a week in my mind.
And absolutely none anywhere else.
No, exactly.
So there you go. Anyway, so back to this Darrow.
So we started out just in a little garage across the hallway from the driveway from the American Hotel, and we started with a guide to answer practical questions, which we've edited every year. It's right here. It's on our website, which is fightingchance.org, and it's sort of like the Yellow Pages. If you imagine a Yellow Pages, and everything was stripped out except the resource information for someone who has cancer. And that's what this is. And then what happened was people started calling us about what I would call more profound psychological issues that come from those words you have cancer.
Can you give me an example of a profound psychological issue that
you
came
think
up
you're going to
early?
die.
Right.
That's the
well, I mean, and again, I don't mean to be a wet blanket, but we all are going to die.
Yeah.
It's you think you're going to die today
or soon, and you don't have everything in order, and
yeah, you think you're going to die. You think you're going to die in a drawn-out, painful way. You think it's going to impact your family, which it does, and turn your life upside down. So You just got a lot going on. We were lucky. Just as we started, the number 2 person at Memorial Sloan Kettering, which had pioneered what's called psycho-oncology, which is the psychological stress from a cancer battle. She came out here. Her husband passed away unexpectedly. She poked her head in our office and said, would you consider talk therapy?
Wow.
Which I didn't really know what it was in those days. I said, we're kind of a practical place. And she said, well, people need to talk. So I said, be my guest. And thus talk therapy became one half of what we did. The other half was all this practical, logistical stuff. And even to this day, as an example, if you're being treated in the New York City hospitals like Memorial and you live out here, you can get a free jitney ticket by coming to our office. We give away 1,000 free jitney tickets a year.
Wow, that's
Thank
amazing.
you, Jeff Lynch and the Hampton Jitney.
Thank you,
Right,
Hampton
thank you,
Jitney.
Hampton Jitney and Utz potato chips.
Yeah.
I don't eat those.
Yeah, I know. I'm not. That's not a plug.
Wait,
I'm just
wait,
saying there's a. All right. So let me ask
Okay.
you this. Let's talk about talk therapy for
Yeah.
a second. So for the uninitiated, what if you can distill what talk therapy is, and if there's any
And what it isn't.
cause and effect, and what it isn't, and what in your 18 years, what results you've seen because of it.
So there's lots of kind of talk therapy. The kind that we're interested in at Fighting Chance is generated from a traumatic experience. And there's several traumatic experiences where talk therapy is used after the event of crisis. So one would be you have cancer, which you consider a death sentence. Another would be you're in Baghdad, a Jeep blows up in your face, your buddy dies, you're in trauma. Another would be out at the retreat. Your husband punches you out, you have trauma. Someone shoots your son, you have trauma.
Right.
Someone dies in a nightclub fire, you have trauma. So the whole area of post-traumatic treatment is where our kind of talk therapy exists.
That's fascinating. I'm just curious. Do you offer the EMDR therapy, or is that something that you've
No,
looked
it's
into yet?
it's talk therapy within the cancer arena is a very specialized form of talk therapy. It's delivered by someone called an oncology social worker, and to even practice talk therapy, you not only have to be a social worker, you have to get a second degree so that you can practice talk therapy with cancer patients, because the
Right.
trauma that flows from a cancer diagnosis and we have to deal with is different than the trauma from these other experiences. I mean, just as an example, first of all, it really radiates through your family. So probably half of our counseling sessions involve people bringing their family in. And over 18 years, I think we've counseled about 2,000 patients.
That's
So
amazing.
that's a lot of people, a lot of family.
And that's had a ripple effect, of course.
Yeah, and then also with cancer, you're worried that it's going to come back, which it often does.
Right. It's that's that thing again. Having lived in LA, you have that first earthquake, and it's the aftershocks that scare you. It's
Yeah.
the will it happen? When will it happen again?
When will it happen
And you
again?
live
So
with this fear.
Right, that's the trauma.
Yeah.
And so, this is the gold standard. We're the only free cancer counseling center of consequence in America. And why? Well, you have to raise a lot of money to provide a free service for anything. And because we have kind of our roots go back to the pioneers at Memorial Sloan Kettering, we've really taken talk therapy a long distance in terms of, what we know about it. We've been doing it for 18 years.
Right.
Well,
and that's about just like before we kind of even move on. And have you been able to see noticeable results of the talk therapy, or is it really just a case by case basis where how do you define
yeah.
what a win looks like in talk therapy?
Well, first of all, we have scales. We measure things. It's science. So where there's a sort of a form you fill out, a scale, a survey, and then you fill out a couple more times as you come along with us. But our end goal is empowerment.
Right.
So that's our key watchword.
To empower the patient and to empower their entire family.
Exactly. To help themselves, because we can't be around forever. So we're trying to move them from a state of trauma and paralysis to a state of empowerment.
And
action.
strength.
Empowerment and action.
Yeah, and I would say you got to be very careful when you make claims about medicine and cancer. But generally speaking, people would say that when you add this element, this holistic element to your medical treatment, you tend to get better results. And I don't want to be more dramatic than saying that, but I think that clearly is demonstrable. And
right,
then,
and again, I'll go back to and even if there's no way of ultimately quantifying that, what it sounds like is you live a better today.
you do. Yep.
And
you have a better journey, as we call it. And then when you're done with us, which is typically once a week for 2 or 3 months, at which point your medical treatment should be advanced. We've developed, we're in our 10th year with this, a partnership with Rodney and Colleen at Yoga Shanti. They are terrific. They make their studio available 2 afternoons a week. And we ask our patients, don't have to, go there for a year. And there is a branch of yoga teachers who specialize in yoga for cancer survivors.
Wow.
In Sag Harbor.
It's a movement within America, but probably 2 of the most, if you will, famous practitioners live out here. It's not Rodney, it's a couple of his people, and they take care of our patients there. And they've been doing it for many years, so
That's
they become very
spectacular.
expert. Yeah.
That's
And that's free
amazing.
too. And then you're launched, and we hope your cancer never comes back. And a lot of people, the last thing they say is, I hope I never see you again.
Yeah, hey.
Well, that would
I
be
say,
great.
Gee, thanks.
I call that a first date.
Yeah, right. Well, we have lots more to talk about with Duncan Darrow from Fighting Chance in Sag Harbor, and we're going to take a quick break. This is Bridget Leroy.
And Alex Sokolow.
And you're listening to Sundays on the East End here on WPPB 88.3, Long Island's only NPR station. We'll be right back.
I only do this by living in the moment, living my life easy and breezy, with peace in my mind, with peace in my heart, with peace in my soul. Wherever I'm going, I'm already home, living in the moment. I'm letting myself off the hook for things I've done. I let my past go past, and now I'm having more fun. I'm letting go of the thoughts that do not make me strong, and I believe this way can feel the same for everyone. And
We're back on Sundays on the East End with Bridget Leroy.
And Alex Sokolow.
You can do that part on
Thank you.
88.3 WPPB FM, Long Island's only NPR station. You can also listen to us online at 883wppb.org, or you can listen on your special Echo device by saying play WPPB, to which mine always says, I can't find WVBB. So
I think
anyway,
Alexis is the only Alexa.
I just said
is
it.
the only creature that gets me.
You are.
I'm like, I want to listen to Early Squeeze, and then like you get Early Squeeze.
Yeah.
Can you turn off that light?
Wasn't I was your early squeeze.
There you go.
There you go. Anyway, well, we're here with Duncan Darrow of Fighting Chance in Sag Harbor. We're talking about this incredible cancer initiative that you started that's free for anybody who needs it or wants it. And we were going to talk about you had said that there was this enormous gap missing between people getting a diagnosis of cancer when you started this 18 years ago and starting treatment. There were all these unanswered questions. There were the monkeys in the mind, and you helped like quiet those monkeys. And we were looking this is one of the pamphlets
pamphlet,
that you
yeah.
have, the Future Fund for Fighting Chance, because obviously you need to raise money since it's a free organization. But some of the questions that people say, I was just diagnosed and I need professional counseling for my shell shock. Can I get it here, and is it free?
Yes.
Oh, there's the short
that's
answer.
a simple
Okay, good,
answer.
because we have
You
like
can
10
get
to go
it,
through.
and it's free.
Right.
I mean, that's incredible. I know nothing about cancer, but now I want to try and understand the disease. Do you have a web-based learning system?
Yes, it's called Cancer Simplified. 40 PowerPoint charts right on our website.
Cancer Simplified on your website. So what's your website?
Fightingchance.org.
We should say that all along.
Okay.
All along.
So please go
fightingchance.org.
check out fightingchance.org to get some wisdom and hopefully some action steps and some empowerment.
So who pays for all of this? That's one of the questions.
The community. I mean, we probably have several hundred donors. I've been a big donor over the years, less so as we've grown our donor base. Foundations, a lot of the larger companies out here are big supporters, especially the Hampton Jitney.
Yeah, they give away 1,000 tickets a year for people.
Yeah, we give away 1,000 Jitney tickets for patients and their caregivers who are going into New York City for treatments that are not necessarily available, in more of a rural cancer care area like here or even Stony Brook. Yeah.
No, during the break we were talking. I asked the question. Has this expanded? This protocol or this what model has this model been picked up by other communities around the country. Have people called you and said, "Hey, what you're doing with Fighting Chance is great. I'm in Missoula, Montana. How do we start something like this?"
That really hasn't happened. Large urban hospitals have some version of what we're doing. However, the talking with the social worker at a memorial, or perhaps that's not a good example, a large urban hospital, the conversation will be brief, 10 minutes. Also, it will be in a hospital.
Right.
If you go to Fighting Chance, we're like a storefront. We're above Geek Hampton. It feels much more like a living room. And when people are involved in talk therapy for any reason, they don't want to do it in a hospital.
But isn't there also, like in my experience, when you talk to somebody that's working in a hospital, somebody that is a social worker or any kind of therapist, they have their mandates and their protocols, and they have their ways of actually interacting with you. I certainly immediately go to, I don't think you're hearing me as a person. You're hearing me as just somebody that is sitting on this chair at this moment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
With or you are your disease, and you don't want to be, justified by what you have. You want to be justified by who you are.
Yeah. And in a lot of large urban hospitals, even sizable suburban hospitals on Long Island, because talk therapy takes time and care, they try to get to the same sort of result, calming the patient, so forth, through drug-based therapy. And so that's going to bring out your Klonopins, your Ambiens, your Xanaxes, and the patient may seem superficially as if anxiety has been relieved, but the core for the anxiety has not been resolved.
Exactly. It's put a Band-Aid on it rather than ripping the Band-Aid off and letting the wound heal.
Yeah, and that's where talk therapy, in our view, is, for this kind of trauma at least, is.
So how do you deal with institutional thought? How do you deal with these hospitals where you want to have a relationship, you want to be able to say, we're here, and at the same time, you're kind of bowing down to a different God?
Yeah, this brings up a cancer center that we'll talk about a little bit later, but when we deal with doctors in cancer centers and hospitals, which our professionals do every day, they will, kind of knee-jerk reaction, gee, I think I'll give the patient some Xanax. And our view is, well, you don't really have to do that. They're going to be coming here, and that's really not necessary. And so there's a push-pull between their kind of protocol, which is go to Xanax, go to Klonopin, and our more holistic approach, which we sort of pioneered, which is just let them talk to someone who's good at listening and give us a little time. We won't cure this in a week, but believe us, in 2 months, what we will do will be much more, profound.
Right, and there is also, and again, I'm not a communist when I say this, but there's this free market capitalist approach to the drug companies and to the entire process of treating disease, treating the patient, versus what you said. I mean, you said this is free.
But that's a whole, we're going to have a whole show, at least one, probably 20, on that, on sick care rather than well care and all of that, and the search for the magic bullet, where the spoiler alert is no one really wants a magic bullet because so much money is made on the treatment rather than the cure.
Right, but I'm just saying it, like, in this conversation, that I can see how if you, and I'm not degrading it, if you work at a hospital, if you spend your life with certain protocols of battling cancer, then that's what you know. It's like to a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And here's a new paradigm, a new way of thinking that could be part of a solution. Has Fighting Chance butted up against that? Has Fighting Chance?
Yeah, we have, and we'll talk maybe later. Perhaps you want to kind of raise it now because it does come up.
Yeah, let's talk.
There's going to be a new cancer center out here,
and this is amazing.
Let's talk about that.
There you go.
That's amazing.
Good segues, you guys would say. On Route 27, right across from the Ford dealership.
So this is like as you enter Southampton, like where the Princess Diner
where you
is.
make your sharp left to go to Wainscott. It's 15,000 square feet. Yeah, $25 million facility.
Wow.
One of the premier cancer centers on Long Island. Has a radiation vault. Right now, the closest one is Riverhead. The closest really good one is Port Jeff. This is as good as Port Jeff. Clinical oncologists, and also now psycho-oncology, which is us. We've been given a rent-free, thank you, Southampton Hospital, office in the cancer center.
This is amazing.
A satellite, and we'll be doing what we do in Sag Harbor. The quarters will be a little smaller, but we'll be closer to doctors, and I think the number of patients we'll be able to help will go up, and we'll still be free.
Right.
Duncan, when is this slated to open?
Right now, the ribbon cutting date is approximately March 1. You can see the building. It's pretty much completed from the exterior.
Right, so you're bringing the mountain to Muhammad.
Yeah, in a way. And I think it's a vote of confidence. 18 years ago, the hospital here, the doctors here, were probably much more skeptical about talk therapy and this idea of treating what we call the whole patient.
Well,
Right.
but then that goes back to there have been obviously tangible results in order for them to have turned around, because doctors base their life on statistics and curves
Right,
and so on.
but like
So-
before we got on the air, you enlightened us a little bit about the history, the cultural history. Maybe we can chat about that a little bit, because you talked about 18 years ago, the big shift. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
where
talk
do,
about
where
the
do these
shift.
thoughts, the schools of thought, come from in your mind?
Well, so a couple, obviously cancer is a big thing. There's a lot of interesting chapters. I mean, the beginning of talk therapy and treating the whole patient started when the American Medical Association changed its official position, which up through the 70s used to be to the doctors of this country, if your patient has cancer, don't tell them.
Wow.
Because it's a death sentence and you don't want them to know.
It was a simpler time.
Yeah. So all of the outgrowth of the trauma and stress from knowing you have cancer was not on the drawing board, because no one was even told they had the disease.
right.
Then you move towards the AIDS period, a form of cancer, and that community was extremely activist. Tell us what we've got. Help us with the psychological stress. I mean, let's really, again, move towards the whole patient approach
Well, but
in the context of AIDS.
And
then
that
carried over
probably,
to cancer.
I'm wondering if that also happened because AIDS was thought of as something, I mean, at least at the time, that you brought on yourself, kind of like
that kind of social stigma it just gets repeated and repeated and repeated.
Yes.
It like the boogeyman kind of approach of them versus us.
Absolutely.
And that's bullshit.
Absolutely.
It's total and complete 100% bullshit.
Okay,
So-
no, I agree.
I know. I don't mean. I get
Stop yelling at me.
I know, I get so angry about that
I do
because
too.
because like the common discourse, not just nationwide but also in the households, is predicated on like crazy always makes the rules.
Who's to blame
Right.
for this? Right.
But all right. I'm sorry. I digress.
But so people who pioneered talk therapy in the context of oncology all mostly came out of the AIDS movement. So
Right.
when we started in 2003, 2004, and so forth, the people who were professionals in our office had kind of cut their teeth counseling AIDS patients. Even today, our senior oncology social worker traces her early counseling experience back to AIDS. So that had a profound effect in terms of treating the whole patient, being activists, and seeing the benefits of talk therapy.
Right.
And that continues, to this day.
And then you said that it's also the other side of it. It's kind of bookended on one end with the AIDS epidemic beginning and
Yep.
people seeking to be more empathetic and compassionate, and then it's bookended on the other side with this sort of recognition now of PTSD as being an actual a diagnosis.
Yeah, so now Dana-Farber, I'm sure many of your listeners know them, a major cancer hospital in Boston. They just came out with the first, I would say, significant study of about 1,000 newly diagnosed patients, concluding that about 20% had a set of symptoms essentially identical to the symptoms of returning veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq, who had been officially diagnosed with PTSD.
Shell shock. So it's like you get shell shocked when you get a cancer diagnosis, right?
It is a lot like shell shock.
Right.
So PTSD is now becoming a more prevalent diagnostic with respect to the trauma from cancer. And then the other thing that's happened over the years is now the medical community, even out here, has pretty much come to see that treating the whole patient, this holistic approach, is beneficial. And a lot of our referrals, come from primary care physicians who are often the ones delivering the bad news. They've seen a scan, they've seen an x-ray, they tell the patient, you have cancer. Patient right there in the doctor's office starts crying.
Right.
And the doctor gives them a script, which essentially says, fighting chance. And he says, you have got to stop crying. You are going to have a huge...
It sounds like what my parents said to me all the time. Happy face, Bridget, happy face.
Right.
No,
That's
I'm
how.
kidding.
You're going to have to stop crying. Go to Fighting Chance within the next 2 days. And most of people who come to Fighting Chance have been diagnosed within 48 hours.
And we're talking with Duncan Darrow of Fighting Chance, fightingchance.org, which is a free program out on the East End. We're incredibly lucky.
That really helps when people get the life-changing news of a diagnosis. It helps to empower them, and it helps to inform them, give them action steps, and it also helps to give them a platform to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, my husband had a lung removed when he was 39 years old. And we didn't have any of this. I mean, he's now, 56? There was no... we went up to, I think it was LIJ, and it was a bad situation, and there wasn't...
Why? I mean, without getting too personal, without getting HIPAA on it, like, was it an incident, or was it a cancer?
He had an enormous tumor in his lung that had gone undiagnosed for a very long time, and his lung collapsed.
Yeah.
And you know,
Eric is a stud, by the way.
Oh,
like,
no
I look
kidding.
at Eric, I'm like
You
I
better
got a little
believe
bit of
it,
a man
baby.
crush on him.
Oh,
Like,
I know everybody does.
You know.
All my boyfriends have a crush on my husband. He's crush worthy.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, but and listen, 6 weeks after he had it, he was back on his kayak, surfing. So it's like, but still, the point was,
If you put that in air quotes, that would be like such a different. He's back on his kayak.
Surfing, air quotes. No, but it was a terrifying time. It was 10 hours of surgery. He had part of his trachea removed, and I'm only bringing it up because I didn't. Luckily, we have our own community of talk therapy of like-minded individuals. So I got a lot of support, and I had a lot of casseroles brought over. But we really didn't know anything or anywhere to turn at any point, and it would have been so useful to have something like this. I mean, and then I had a year where I thought, at least a year afterward, where I just thought he was going to die. And I had no one to talk to, so
Right.
it's very personal for me
Right,
as well.
and I know, like, it's an area I care a lot about. Is I go back to the word connection. It's creating connections that give information, and it's happening in Sag Harbor. It's happening on the East End. It's happening with Southampton Hospital. It's happening in a very kind of holistic way. Probably, like, Duncan, when you started, did you have any long-term expectations of Fighting Chance?
Yeah, the goal in my mind was to be viewed as hospice, and I kind of had this anecdote, which was if you announced to the East End community that hospice was going bankrupt and going out of business, probably you would end up with 100 bake sales the next day. People would say, it's free, but it's so core to the healthcare system, we can't let it happen.
Right.
And I wanted to get Fighting Chance to that same level, where people would say, oh my God, if it's going bankrupt, it's become core to the healthcare
Right.
system.
This is an essential tool in the toolbox for everybody.
Yeah, because cancer will kill 25% of everyone every year. So it's a big cause of death.
Wait. Say that again.
So if you look at the cause of death of the people on the East End, the people in the United States, 25% is cancer.
Wow.
40% of all Americans will get cancer before they die. So it's a very pervasive disease.
Right, which means that everybody knows somebody. Everybody's been touched by it.
Yeah,
everyone's been touched. I think that's the very first thing.
Well,
Yeah.
we're going to take one more break and come back talking to Duncan Darrow of Fighting Chance. You can check out the website, fightingchance.org, and you can also check out our website at 883wppp.org. If you're feeling generous, you can make 2 donations today. You can make one to Fighting Chance and one to the radio station. We are Long Island's only NPR station. You're listening to Sundays on the East End with Bridget Leroy and Alex.
And Alex Sokolow.
I tried to say your name fast.
That's okay.
And we will be back in 1 minute. Thank you. Well, we're back with Sundays on the East End with Bridget Leroy and Alex Sokolow. We never get that name thing right. You're listening to us here on 88.3 WPPB, Long Island's only NPR station. You can also listen to us online at 883WPPB.org. And we're actually at the beginning of a fund drive, so we can use your donations to keep shows like this on the air, please.
Totes McGee.
What?
Did you get a tote bag? With the
Totes
fun rides?
McGee?
Yeah, don't like NPR radio.
If you give $1 million, I'm sure we could scrounge one up for you.
Don't you get a tote bag? if you
Anyway,
get one?
we're here on the air with Duncan Darrow of fightingchance.org, which you can check out as well, which is a free service based in Sag Harbor, which is also going to be part of the new cancer center in Southampton. But you have a whole other hat, which is also related. Please tell us about that.
Well, this is another charity also on the web called cancertrust.org, and it has kind of an interesting story, backstory as well.
How does it differentiate?
So we were blessed with a group of wealthy Wall Street donors, like many charities. We all need a few of those, and they wanted to do something more than just write a check. So I said, well, why don't you start a think tank and figure out something else you want to do? And they said, great, and found a place in New York. We're about 10 of them, very successful money managers. And they said, well, can you put someone in to kind of lead the group? Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to get Jim Watson, who discovered DNA. And
wait. Discovered DNA? He's the head of this cancer trust?
Well, like Watson and Crick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Which one got into problems with Jim? Okay,
Yeah.
well, you know what? He was an iconoclast.
Yeah, he was a Nobel Prize winner. He's at Cold Spring Harbor, partway up the island.
Uh-huh.
And so Jim sat with these guys, and I was observing. We had another fellow, Sid Mukherjee, who wrote a wonderful book called The Emperor of All Maladies about cancer. And they were just spitballing sessions that went on for about a year, every couple months. Jim was challenging them and said, come up with a big idea. And at the end, they said, well, Duncan, you can stop. I think we know what we're going to do. I said, great. What's up? I said, we're going to cure cancer.
All right, there you go.
I said, okay.
Yeah, give me Joe Biden
great.
online, too.
What a good idea.
I said, how are you going to do that? What's the secret sauce? I said, there are all these cancer hospitals, and they don't collaborate.
Yeah.
They absolutely don't. In fact, it's worse than that. If you've got a
They're
genius,
competitive.
Yeah, if you've got a genius researcher in a lab who might be coming up with the Coke formula, so to speak, you don't want a researcher from another cancer center just down the road to go in there, because if it turns out Coke's going to pay you billions of royalties, the other cancer center is going to say, well, we're entitled to 12% of that.
Oh my gosh, so it's such a race.
Not
race
good.
to the finish,
Not
and
good.
very competitive.
So how do you blow up
So
that?
what we did was, I'll say we, because I'm the chairman of it, although it's the work has been done by a lot of terrific people. We then go out and we put together a package of 4 comprehensive cancer centers, really the best of the best. The first package was Columbia, Sinai, Hopkins, and Penn. And they signed an elaborate agreement, 35 pages,
Go Quakers.
describing how they are going to collaborate for 10 years.
Wow.
And split any royalties if they do discover the so-called Coke formula. Then we take that package to a pharmaceutical company and say, you always need to augment your drug development pipeline. These 4 institutions will work with you over a decade as long as you fund them at the rate of $50 million a year or $500 million total. And the first transaction was completed a couple years ago, and shout out to Celgene, who's the funder. And the 4 institutions are doing a great job.
And people can check up on this. It's cancertrust.org.
Cancertrust.org.
But even there, I mean, like starting with Fighting Chance, it's the same basic thing. How do we get people talking? How do we get information going? How do we get connections? And God bless you for kind of figuring out a way to handle it on a corporate and financial level where the incentives belie that.
Yeah, and so we've done a couple of these now. Our current collaborative is Cold Spring Harbor, which we just mentioned. Dana-Farber up in Boston, Weill Cornell, and the Rockefeller University. So again, a very intriguing, promising group of intellectuals, and we're now in discussions with a pharmaceutical company for exactly the same deal we did with Celgene, which is $500 million at the rate of $50 million per year. And then if anything comes out of that might be commercializable or they of course get the right of first refusal to license it. They don't want
Right, but like
someone-
but corporations, I think in part started because of all of the shipfaring in like Holland back in the 15 or 1600s, where ships would go out for 10 or 15 years. You wouldn't know what would come back, and so all of the people investing in them said, "Why don't we pool our resources and kind of hedge our bets and mitigate our risk?"
Yeah.
You're kind of talking about a similar thing. It's using basic economy or economic principles and now applying it to a common good and medical breakthrough.
Well, then I'm sorry, Danny, but then let's bring that back. I mean, because everything you're doing with CancerTrust.org sounds very big and very weighty.
Yes,
and
it's
if we
big,
get back
and
to
Fighting Chance is local.
then
Right.
Fighting Chance is something local. It's
Right.
something Sag Harbor based, and it's something people can really wrap their
So
head
let's talk
around.
about the
I
new
mean, it's
cancer
wonderful.
center.
Yes.
That's a good yes. I guess I said segue.
Another
again.
segue.
That's it.
You guys are segue experts. I guess.
Yes, we
That's
are.
it.
Yeah, but Cancer Trust does inform what we do. We have a pretty remarkable understanding of cancer drugs as a consequence. So out here, the Phillips family, local family, gave about $13 million. The hospital raised another 10 or so, got up to $25 million, broke ground last June. A little more than 14, 15 months ago. You can see the building. It's pretty much built now. It's 15,000 square feet.
It's right there, like when you're about to make that turn toward Hank's Pumpkin Town, right?
Yeah.
Right there at the end of like.
The
we're at
most
27
important
turns.
thing it brings to the community healthcare-wise is a radiation vault. Radiation is one of the most prevalent forms of treating cancer. The closest one until this was built was really in Port Jefferson.
Right.
And we have about 10 good souls who drive patients every day from all around the Hamptons
Right, because
to Port Jeff
when you're
to go to radiation.
when you're going through a radiation protocol, it's multiple times a week.
Yeah, it's Monday through Friday. Cannot miss a day for 6 weeks.
That's
And
a
tell
lot
me,
of
tell me
drive
about
time.
these people who drive these other people. They're volunteers.
They're volunteers. If you want to volunteer, it's I think a very rewarding experience. And you'll pick someone up in Amagansett, and you'll drive them to Port Jeff or maybe someplace closer.
and you'll wait for them to have their
Wait,
treatment.
Gotta wait, and then you drive them back. And you're kind of what we call an empathic witness. You don't need to talk a lot. First of all, you got to concentrate on driving. But these people tend to be isolated. Cancer isolates you. You don't want to go out as much as you used to. And so now you're in a car with a pleasant, conscientious stranger, and you start talking.
And that brings us right back to the very beginning of what we were talking about, which is that talk is a form of cure, is a form, any kind of illness where you feel like you are alone in the world is going to isolate you. And isolation causes depression. It's a horrible, dark place to be. And Fighting Chance really gives people an opportunity to feel like they are not alone through talk therapy. Now, I just want to bring up one thing because we talked about it beforehand before we end. It's not group therapy. This isn't like going to a 12-step meeting or something like that.
No.
This is talk with a trained psycho-oncologist.
one-on-one in a private office. However, we do run what are sometimes called support groups.
Okay, because those are very important as well, I'm sure.
Then we've run many of them. I think the one that really touches my heart the most was there was a period of time about a year ago when the husbands of 6 particular wives all died within 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
And we had been counseling all 6 of them. And their wives had occasionally come in. They usually came in by themselves. And after they passed, the wives came to us kind of as a group and said, could you create something like a bereavement group for the 6 of us? We've all been kind of talking, and it ended up being called the Widows Group. And it went on for about 2 years, and I still bump into some of those women, and it just, I think it was a very constructive thing.
And even that, like bereavement and grief are topics that I think people aren't comfortable necessarily talking about or thinking about, and yet having the connection, having the outlet, having the people to go through it with, I think is a gift that everybody. I mean, it's something that you'll carry the rest of your life and hopefully pay forward. Listening and being present when somebody is, compassion. Ultimately, I think the word comes from to suffer with. Come with passion.
Right.
And so it's to suffer with, and there's nobility in that.
So I'll mention one other topic because I'm sure many of your listeners will always ask, well, when are we going to cure cancer? Which is not our job at Fighting Chance, but people always wonder about it. And I would say that the short answer, because I've now seen a lot of what's going on in the field, is algorithms. So ultimately, algorithms.
Isn't that what they do on Facebook? Algorithms?
They do it. It's
Right.
everywhere.
I was hoping you were going to say like February 27th.
But algorithms, algos are gonna get it.
Yeah.
Eventually, they're gonna get everything.
They're going to figure it out.
Yep, they're gonna figure it out.
So there will be an end to all of this, and
I
then
think
there'll be
so,
an end
yeah.
to Fighting Chance.
When the last dog dies.
That's but that's what you said. I hope I never see you again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That would be wouldn't that be a great day? I hope I live that
This
long.
has been just such an illuminating conversation and bringing up so much about cancer going from being something that the doctors didn't even tell patients they had because it was too depressing and too much of a death sentence, to it now being something that not only can be discussed but should be discussed, and people shouldn't feel alone when they go through this because we all have been touched. Someone that we know has had cancer, and
I would also just suggest that if you can find moments of humor, you're recovering. So it's who's going to control your message. And if you can control your own message, then, and which can happen with humor, can happen in any other ways, then you're on the road to recovery. And what I think here, and the word that Duncan had used before, is it's empowerment. That's the word. Now, just where can people go if they want to get involved?
So, Fighting Chance, 631-725-4646. A trained professional will answer the phone. They can answer questions over the phone or get you an appointment and put you into this kind of longer-term protocol. Website is www.fightingchance.org.
Yeah, and say the phone number again.
725-4646, our local area code 631.
that's
Okay.
wonderful.
Thank you, folks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
talking
much,
to you.
Duncan, and what a pleasure for me and for Bridget as well as people who have lost parents and who are of the age of life where cancer becomes more and more of a topic of conversation.
Well, your father, not on a negative note, but your father died at 57?
58 years old.
58?
He actually, so his last treatment was in City of Hope, and he was in Los Angeles, and he basically said, you're going to die. And he actually said, I can't die in Los Angeles. I'll never live it down.
Oh my gosh. And my dad died at 65, and here I am at 55. He'd already had cancer twice. So
Yeah.
we all need to look after ourselves, but also know where to go if we are
And be
hit.
blessed for today.
Yep.
I mean, thank you for listening. Thanks, sir. Have a great Sunday, and be well and stay well.
Yes, and you're listening to Sundays on the East End with Bridget Leroy and Alex Sokolow here on 88.3 WPPB. You can also listen on 883wppb.org and always make a donation to keep shows like this on the air. So we'll hear you and see you again next week. Funding for Sundays on the East End is provided in part by CP Complete Construction and Renovation, with additional support from The Independent and from Just Beyond Infinity Googleplex.